So you want to make viral edits to finally get loads of followers and brag in front of your friends. But there's one problem. When you open After Effects, you have no clue what to do or where to start. Well, today I will show you exactly how to use After Effects and make TikTok edits so good that you won't stop going viral. But before we start, we're going to need 3 essential things, which are going to be a sound, our clips, and of course After Effects itself. And to find a good editing sound, I recommend you to look on SoundCloud or YouTube. For the clips, which are most important, I'm going to leave you the Discord server I use in the description. Now, when we first open up After Effects, we will be met with this exact screen. All of this is our workspace, but for now we want to create our first own project. So we're going to click on New Composition, and you're going to see this window popping up. And in here, again, there's going to be 3 essential settings we have to adjust. First, we have to choose our resolution. In my case, I want to have a square resolution, so I'm going to go for 1080 by 1080. Alternative resolutions for social media could also be 1170 by 1560, 1080 by 1920, or 1080 by 1350. Which one you choose is up to you. Now, next, we're going to make sure that our frame rate is put to 60 FPS, so we get the smoothest outcome. Lastly, we have to adjust the duration to however long we want our edit to be. In my case, I want it to be exactly 1 minute long, so I'm going to put the value that's responsible for the minutes to 1, the seconds to 0, and the frames also to 0. Now press OK, but don't worry if during the edit you decide to change your mind. Just right click, go to composition settings, and you can change it from here. Now to get rid of the black screen, we're going to have to import our footage and our sound. And to do that, we're going to select the project panel in the left where you can see all your footage. And now we can just select our sound and scene pack and drag it into this project panel. From here, just click and then drag it onto your timeline. And like this, we already see our footage and have it imported into our timeline. Now that we're ready to work, we have to mark our beat drops first, because obviously we need to know when our clips are supposed to change. And to do that, the first thing we want to do is disable the audio of our footage layer, which you can do by just clicking on the speaker right here. And now the only thing that has sound will be our music. And instead of just listening along and guessing where the beat drops are, we can use a way more accurate feature, which is called audio amplitude. So right click onto your sound layer, go to keyframe assistant, and then click on convert audio into keyframes. Now you can see instead of 2, we have 3 layers, and the third one is going to be our audio amplitude. So click on it and make sure you selected it. Then press Z on your keyboard to bring up all the keyframes. And inside these keyframes, you have now all the data to where your beat drops are located. To access the data, we're now going to click on both channels slider right here. So all the keyframes at the bottom are selected. And then we will open our graph editor by clicking on this window right here. Now you can see we have a lot of spikes going up and down. And every time we have a spike, it's going to tell us that there's a beat drop. And because my edit has an intro, obviously it doesn't start here, but I'm going to go to the place and time where my actual editing part is supposed to start. This is dependent on your personal audio, so make sure you listen along and decide where you want your edit to start. In my case, it's going to be here. What we can do to make it easier is we can zoom in a bit by using this button right here. And now all the spikes are a bit more clear. To remember where the spikes are located, we're going to set a marker. So we're going to mark every single beat drop, and then later on we can access these markers and see where our clips are supposed to change, rather than memorizing all the timestamps. To create a marker, go to the top of your timeline and select this button right here on the very right. Click it once and you can see we have a numbered marker called 1. And because we don't just have 1 beat drop, we're going to go ahead and do this for all the times where our beat is dropping and we want our clips to change. In my case, the next beat drop is this one right here. So I'm going to move my time indicator ahead till I'm on the point, and then again click the marker button, and now you can see we have the second marker. Also very important, depending on your edit audio, some spikes may be inaccurate, so always listen along and actually check if there's a beat drop or not. Once you marked all your beat drops, your timeline should look something like this with a lot of markers. And now we can go ahead, close the graph editor again, and delete the audio amplitude layer. Now we can enable the audio of our footage again, because we now have to find our intro scenes. Ideally, if you do that, you already have an idea in your mind of which scenes you want to use for your intro. If not, just scatter through your footage till you find the scene you like. As you can see, my footage is way longer than my timeline. And to now only cut out the part that I want to use for my edit, I'm going to double click onto my clip layer, which is the top one, and it will open up an extra window in the top just for our layer. And here you might realize that you can also now watch the full footage and not just the little square that we put as our resolution earlier. Below that, we can see our second timeline, and instead of it being 1 minute long, it will now cover the entire duration of your scene pack. And if you now have a scene in mind that you want to use for your intro, we can just use our mini time indicator on our mini timeline and then drag it ahead till we have the scene that we want to use for our intro. That's why I recommend having a rough idea of which scenes you want to use. It's just gonna make it a bit easier. Now in here, you can also preview the footage by just pressing space on your keyboard and we'll play ahead.
Yes, Alan?
And once you're certain you want to use the scene, we can then go ahead to this bracket right here, right below our mini timeline, and then click it once. As you can see on our main timeline, now the whole footage cut to the beginning of our composition. And if we now go back to the composition tab, which you can see in the top left, you will realize that our edit now starts with the exact scene that we wanted. Now in some instances, like for me right now, you will realize that the footage is way too zoomed in for our composition. That might happen because our scene pack has a higher resolution than our composition that we set earlier. If you're using 4K scenes with a resolution of 3840 by 2160, 1060, it obviously won't fit into our composition that's 1080 by 1080. For the same reason, you can't watch a movie in full screen when you hold your phone up like this. And what we want to do to fix that is click on our layer and then press S on our keyboard. This will bring up the scaling property, and we can now just decrease the value until it fits our screen. Same thing the other way around. If your clip is too small, we're just going to increase the value till it fits. And in my case, I want my intro to be containing 3 clips from the movie, which are kind of far apart on the scene pack. And to cut them out correctly, I'm going to go ahead with my time indicator to where I want this first clip to end and the new one to start. And then while having the layer selected, press Ctrl, Shift and D. As you can see, this will split our layer in half, and we can now do the same thing we did earlier. Just double click onto the new layer, make sure it's the top one, and then drag ahead our mini time indicator on our mini timeline till we find the next clip that we want to use. And once we found the next scene that we want to use, which for me is right here, we're going to go ahead back to the bracket, click it once, and you can see on our main timeline, our time indicator automatically cut to the place in time, and we now have the 2 clips perfectly aligned. And now depending on how many clips you want in your intro, you're going to do this however often you need. Once we got all the clips that we want to use in our intro set, we next have to find the clips that will play when our editing part starts, which means after the beat drop. And the process for this will be pretty similar to finding the clips in our intro, just a bit shorter. Start by dragging your time indicator to the place where your first beat drop starts, which we marked earlier, and then re-import the whole scene pack from your project tab onto your timeline. Make sure it aligns with your time indicator. Now, if you have to adjust the size like we did earlier by pressing S and then scaling it down, double click onto the layer, and again, it's going to bring up this window. And the process to finding the clips now is the exact same that we used in the intro. Start by heading to your small timeline. Actually, it's pretty average sized. And then drag ahead your average size time indicator till you find the first clip you want to use in your edit. Go back to the bracket and click it once. As you can see on our main timeline, it's now cut to the exact place. But to make the scenes switch at the exact time we want them to, we're going to zoom in, then we can right click onto the next marker, which for me is the second one, and click on go to marker time. Now make sure the clip layer is selected and press Ctrl, Shift and D. This again will split the whole layer. And now we have to double click onto the top one and then drag ahead the time indicator till we find the next scene. But you don't necessarily have to go further than this. You can also go back on the timeline. Then once we found the clip that we want to use, we're again going to press onto the bracket, and it will push the whole scene pack back to the time where our clip starts. This exact process we have to do to find all the clips for our edit. So right click onto the next time marker and again hit Ctrl, Shift and D on your keyboard. Now double click onto the top layer, and from here on repeat the same steps over and over. When finding your clips, it's very important that they have some slight movement but not too much. Otherwise it will mess up our slow motion later on. Another thing you want to watch out for is that the character's face is well lit. Don't have it be too dark but also not too bright. Find a good balance between that. Now once you got all your clips ready and you play them ahead, you might realize that the character moves out of the center of the screen, like in this example. As you can see, the character starts nice and center, but then because he moves, he suddenly is out of frame. And we obviously want our main character to always be visible. And to fix that, we're gonna add a face tracker, which basically tracks the character's movement and then always aligns it to the middle of the screen. Double click onto your clip. Again, we were gonna have this wide view. And then on the right side of our screen, we're gonna open up the tracker panel. In case you can't find that, head to the top, click on window and click on tracker. Now within this face tracker, we have different options. Because we want to stabilize our face to the center of the screen, we're gonna select stabilize motion. Once we click that and we zoom in on our clip, we can see these 2 squares which form our track point. This we can use to mark where we want to track. But if we keep this so small, it's going to be very inaccurate. What we have to do is click onto the squares and then drag them a bit bigger. Don't go too big because it's going to take way too much time to analyze. Once we have it at a decent size, we're going to go ahead and drag it on the character's nose. And in case you're editing Voldemort, use his eyes. Once we make sure the tracker is aligned with the character's nose, we will go back to the tracker panel and click on this button right here, which is analyze forward. Now after clicking that, you will see that our character starts moving and our tracker will bond to his nose. This process might take a while depending on how fast your PC works, but once it's done, it's going to look like this. We're going to have each frame as a track point, ideally following the nose. In case one of the tracking points goes off the course, which can happen quite often, all you got to do is click on it and drag it back to the nose. Last thing we have to do is click on apply, then select X only and press OK. This will align the character's face to the center of the screen, but make sure you do this for all your clips, no matter how much movement they have, including the ones in the intro. Once you're done tracking all your clips, you might realize that the footage is kind of stuttering. And to fix that, we're going to select all our clips by pressing on the top one, then holding shift and clicking on the bottom one, and clicking this box which enables motion blur, double clicking this box which enables frame blending, and then lastly make sure you select all the clips but only from your editing part, and disable the speaker to turn off the sound, but don't disable the sound of the intro. Next, we have to make sure that we align the position of our clips, because even though the face is now tracked to the center, the position might still be off, as you can see in my first clip. And to fix that, we're going to zoom in and then press P on our keyboard while having the clip selected. This will bring up the position property, and now we're going to increase or decrease the X value on the left till the character's face is fully in the center of our screen. Some clips might not require additional alignment, but make sure to check check all of them because it's gonna be hard changing them later. Once we aligned all the clips, there's only one last step before we can add our first effect. Because to add our effects, we're gonna have to isolate our clip so that the effects only impact the small portion of our clip that we actually wanted to. Click onto your first editing clip and then press Ctrl Shift and C. This will bring up a window and we gotta make sure we select the bottom option and then enable this check mark. Press OK, and if we zoom in, you can see that the clip is now isolated into a separate composition. What we can do alternatively is just right click onto the clip, then select pre-compose with the same settings and then press OK. Again, we're gonna have to do this for all our editing clips. Now to finally add our first effects, we're gonna head to the right again and open our effects and presets panel. The first effect we wanna add is a slow motion to make the clips look a bit smoother. So search for Twixtor and then drag it onto your first clip. In case you can't find Twixtor in your After Effects, make sure to get it from the Discord link in the description. The first thing we wanna do in Twixtor is adjust our settings. To start, disable the checkmark that says in FPS is out FPS, and we're gonna have to replace this value with whatever frame rate our clips have. To check the frame rate of our clips, we can open the project panel, then right click onto our scene pack, go on interpret footage and select main. Now in here you can see the exact frame rate our clip has, so copy it by pressing Ctrl and C, then go back to the effects controls panel and paste it in here by pressing Ctrl and V. Next we're gonna put the image prep from none to contrast / edge enhance. Crank the motion sensitivity from 70 all the way up to 100, then put the frame interpolation from blend to motion weighted blend and enable the checkmark next to smart blend. Now we gotta make sure that our time indicator is at the very first frame of our clip, and then we're gonna press the stopwatch next to speed percentage to create the first keyframe. And for the value we're gonna choose 200%. A keyframe marks the value of a certain effect for a certain time, and by putting our speed percentage to 200 we basically speed our clip up to 2x. But don't worry, we're gonna change that, so select your clip and press U on your keyboard to bring up the set keyframe. Now you can zoom in a bit and we're gonna go to the middle of our clip, which is right here, and then we're gonna put the speed percentage value from 200 back down to 60. As you can see, this created a second keyframe, which means that the speed will go from 200% down to 60%. Lastly, we're gonna go to the end of our clip and then put the value back up to 200. This means that our clip will slow down and then speed up for the next clip to start. And to make these keyframes look a bit smoother, we're gonna select all of them, right click, go to keyframe assistant and hit easy ease. By doing that, we can basically adjust the graph which our animation is playing in. So open your graph editor and now click onto the graph to change it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna select the top value and just drag it straight down. The bottom handle we're gonna extend to the left but keep it in the same dimension. For the other side, we have to mirror what we just did. So we're gonna start with the bottom handle and extend it to the right, about the same amount as the other one. And then the top one we're just gonna drag straight down. Now we can close the graph editor again and we're done with our first effect. But wait, if you want to take editing more serious, check out my new private community filled with hours worth of exclusive content updated daily, combined with private live calls every week. So if you want to become the best editor and meet like-minded people, click the second link in the description. The second effect we're gonna add is a zoom in to ensure some additional movement and prevent our edit from looking stiff. And for that we're gonna go back to our effects and presets panel and this time search for S_blur more curves. Again, drag it onto your clip, and this time the only thing we're gonna do is set a keyframe for the Z distance right here. Now we will go ahead to the end of our clip and put the value from 1 down to 0.85. If we preview the clip, you can see it's slowly zooming in, but again we're gonna change the graph to make it look a bit smoother. So press U to bring up the keyframes, and this time select the bottom ones from the zoom in effect. Right click, go to keyframe assistant and hit easy ease. Open the graph editor, and this time because we only have 2 keyframes instead of 3, our graph will look like this. Click onto it and then drag the first one a bit down, but not all the way, keep it a bit diagonal, and then do the same thing but other way around for the bottom one. So we're gonna click on it, drag it up, and again leave it a bit diagonal. Depending on how fast you want your zooms to be, you can make them a bit longer, or if you want them to be a bit slower, you can keep them short. I like to go for something in the middle, so I'm gonna put mine like this. Close the graph editor, and you can see we now have both of our effects with all the keyframes on our clip. And because we don't want our effects just to be on one clip, we're gonna put them on all our other clips as well. So make sure you select all the keyframes at once, and then click onto the effect name under the effects control panel. Once you selected it from here, press Ctrl and C on your keyboard. Then very important, go to the first frame of the next clip, select the clip, and then press Ctrl and V. It will automatically paste the keyframes onto this clip as well. Now when we press U to bring up the keyframes, you can see they don't fit because this clip is obviously a bit longer than the previous one. And if we keep the keyframes like this, it's not gonna look good. So what we have to do is to adjust the keyframes to the length of our clip. To do that, we're gonna select all the keyframes and then press Alt on our keyboard. Make sure you hold Alt and then you can lengthen or shorten the keyframes however you need it for your clip. Make sure you put the effects on all your editing clips and that the keyframes match with the end of the clip. Once we applied the effects to all our clips, our edit will already look very good. And now we're gonna go to the most important part, which is gonna be an intro. The intro has to be good because it's the first thing our viewers are gonna watch from our edit. I like to use text in my intro, so I'm gonna go to the first frame of our composition and I'm gonna listen to what my character says.
Yeah, yes, Alan?
If you had troubles understanding this, he says, "Hey, Elberstrom," and then the other character replies with, "Yes, Alan." And now that we know what our characters say, we're gonna go to the top and select the text tool, which is the T, press onto our clip, and then type out what they say. As you can see, my text doesn't fit into the picture at all. It's way too big, and I also don't like the font. And to change all that, we have this very nice character panel. So double click onto the text, make sure all of it is selected. And now the values in here are very, very important. We're gonna start with the font. Obviously, we want a nicer font because this looks like my math exam. So click onto where it says Times New Roman, and the version I always use is the Arial Bold. So click on that. And you can see the font already looks a bit better, but it still doesn't fit. So next we're going to adjust the font size, which is this value right here. We're going to put that all the way down till it fits our clip. I usually like to go for about 35, which looks very, very clean. I know this looks pretty small right now, but later on when you upload data, it's going to come across a bit bigger. So I like to go for around 30, 35-ish. And then also if you want to, we can increase the tracking, meaning the space between each letter. And on the bottom, we can make our text bold. We can make it italic, however you want it to be. And now I want my text in the center of the screen, obviously not in some corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my text layer and I'm going to open up the align panel on the right. Now in here, we have the option to align our text. So we're going to align it horizontally and then vertically, so it's in the exact center of our screen. And just like this, we already made our text look way better, but still it looks plain. So we're going to add some effects to it. To start, open your effects and presets panel and search for bevel alpha. Drag it onto the text layer and we're going to put the edge thickness from 2 to 1 and the light intensity from 0.4 to 0.2. This will add some texture to the text. Next, we're going to search for deep glow. Again, drag it onto the text layer. And as the name already says, this will add a glow. But obviously, this is way too bright. So we're going to change the exposure from 1 to 0.2 and the radius we will leave at 500. Lastly, to add some more depth, we're going to search for drop shadow. And like the name says, it will add a shadow behind our characters, which will add some depth. For that, we're going to put the opacity to 100, the distance to 0, and the softness to 100. There's millions of different text effects. And I can only show you this much in the video. So watch the tutorial in the top right corner if you want to see some more advanced stuff. But for now, let's keep it simple to understand. One thing you can now do to change the appearance of your text is select a certain word, or you can select the whole text. And then you can head back to your character panel and click on this white box. If you click on that, it will open up this panel, which is called text color. And as the name already says, in here you can change the color of your text. Let's put it to red. And if we press OK, you can see our text is now red. Another thing you can do is add a paragraph by just pressing enter. And as you can see, it separates the words. But there's way too much space between these two words. So we're going to select the whole text again. And of course, there's a setting in our character panel as well, which is the one right here called set deleting. And instead of putting 126, we're going to just put it to 25. And that way they will be nice and close. Also, the values you put in here are going to be dependent on your font size. Another cool effect that you should use is a text stroke. And to create it, this time we're just going to select the top word, then go to our character panel and click this little arrow next to the two boxes. And by clicking that, you can see we now have a transparent text with only the outlines showing. If your outlines are way too thick, we're going to go to this value right here, which is set the stroke width. And I like to go for 1.5. As I said, there's just way too many text effects. So watch the tutorial if you want to learn more. Our characters are obviously saying more than just one sentence, so we're going to have to change the text as well. And to do that, we're going to listen along to where the next character starts speaking.
Yeah, we're just yes, sir.
Which is right here. And then we're going to select our text layer and cut it by pressing Ctrl Shift and D. As you can see, we now have two text layers. The top one is a bit longer. And by doing that, the one we just created just stays how it is. And we can change the top one to fit whatever the next character is saying, which in my case is no Ellen. So just select the whole text again and then replace it with what the character is saying. If you want to get rid of the stroke text this time, just select all the text. Then again, just click this little swap button right here. Make sure that you write out completely everything that's said in the intro. And then once we added all our text layers containing all the text our characters are saying, we now want to add an animation to make it look a bit smoother. Because if we play the edit now, the text is just going to switch between each other and there's not going to be a cool animation to make it look a bit smoother.
Yeah, we're just yes, Alan.
Why are there copies of the style section all over the place?
And to add our cool animation, again, we're going to go to the beginning of our clip, the first text layer, and then go to effects and presets and search for fade up words. As the name already reveals, this will just fade up our words step by step. Make sure your time indicator is at the beginning of the text layer and then just drag the preset onto your text layer. Because it's a preset and not an effect, we're going to have keyframes. So press U to bring them up and you can see we have one at the beginning, which is 0%, meaning 0% of our text is revealed. And then the second one is 100%, which means that 100% of our text will be revealed by the time this keyframe is reached. And what's really important is that we adjust these keyframes to the exact talking speed of our characters. Because the first keyframe has to be where our character starts speaking and the second one has to be where he finished speaking. If we mess this up, it's going to look very unsynced. How I like to do it is just listen along and then whenever the character stops speaking, I'm going to pause my time marker and just drag the keyframe ahead. So around here he stops speaking, but as you can see, our keyframe is way ahead of that, which will result in our edit looking a bit poorly. So take the keyframe and drag it to where our time indicator currently is at, which is right here. Sometimes you might have to adjust this a little bit depending on how fast your character is speaking. If that's the case, just drag the character to the left or to the right, however you need it. Now, next thing we have to do is make our fade out animation, because obviously we don't want our text to just fade in, but we also need it to fade out so that we have space for the next text. And the preset we will use for this is called fade out slow. But before we drag it onto our text, make sure your time indicator is where you want the animation to start, meaning where you want your text to start fading out, not fading in. Then just drag the preset onto your text layer, and again, because the preset, we're gonna have keyframes, so press U to bring them up, and then just adjust them to the end of your clip. It's the same as earlier. The first keyframe is gonna mark the start, and the second keyframe is gonna mark the end. So go ahead and drag the second keyframe to where your text is ending. And now when we play our text, you can see it's fading in and fading out very smoothly.
Yeah, we're just Yes, sir.
And now obviously we have to add these two effects to all our text layers so it has a nice unity. What's important to say is that there's also a million different ways of how you can make your text fade up. You can have it float in, you can have it pop in, but like I said, we want to keep it simple for this video, so I made another tutorial on how to make text animations. Once we added the text effects to all of our text layers, another important thing which a lot of people don't do is that a smooth transition between our clips and the intro. Because if you use different clips like I did, and we just have them cut to the next clip, it's not going to look that smooth. Just watch yourself.
Maybe it did go.
It's very sudden and not that nice. And to make it look a bit better, we're going to use one of the most popular transitions at the moment, which is a nice white flash. I'm sure you have seen it before. And to make this white solid transition, it's very important that we go to the place in time where our clips switch, which is right here, as you can see. Then we're going to go to the very top, click on layer, new, and press solid. Now, if you haven't already, make sure the color is set to white and then press on OK. We don't want it to cover our entire edit, so we're going to zoom in and then go 20 frames ahead, which is about this much. And then we're going to cut it by pressing Ctrl Shift and D. Delete the excess part. And now we're going to go 50 frames in the other direction, which is right here. Then press Ctrl Shift and D and delete whatever comes after this. By the way, 1 frame is your time indicator, just moving 1 to the left or right. That's how we count frames. Now we're going to start by going to the very beginning of our layer, which is right here. And then we're going to press T while having it selected to bring up the opacity. Opacity basically means the transparency. So if it's at 100%, it's 100% visible. If it's at 0%, it's going to be invisible. Then we're going to set a keyframe right here and put the value to 0 to make it transparent. Then we're going to go ahead to the place in time where our clips are cutting, which is right here. And right here, we're going to put the value from 0 up to 100% so it's fully visible. And then one last time, because we want it to disappear again, we're going to go to the end of our layer. Again, we want to make it look a bit smoother, so we're going to select all the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant, and then hit easy ease. Now if we open up the graph editor, you can see we have these 3 points again, and we're going to start by just putting the top one on the left straight down like this, not all the way but a little bit, and then drag the bottom one towards that direction to the right, not all the way, just a little bit, till it looks something like this, like a nice water slide. Then we're going to go to the other one, but this time we won't copy the exact graph. The only thing we're going to do here is select the top one and drag it down in a 30% angle, about this much. If you suck at mathematics, this is a 30-degree angle. Once that's done, we can close our graph editor, and you want to duplicate this layer to every time your clip changes in the intro. And then also what most people do is put it at the first clip that follows your intro. And to duplicate the layer, we're going to click on it and press Ctrl and D. As you can see, we now have 2 ones. If we press U while having it selected, it has the exact same keyframes. And then we're going to drag it ahead to the next place in time where we want it to be, which in my case is right here. Only thing we have to check that the keyframe in the middle exactly aligns with our cut point, which it doesn't, so I'm going to drag it 1 to the right. Make sure it aligns. After this is done, I also want my editing part to play twice. So the first time it finishes, the edit isn't over, but it's going to play 1 more time. Makes sense. And to do that, all we got to do is select all of our editing clips, which you can see are the pre-compositions right here. So we're going to select all of them by pressing down Shift. And then we're going to pre-compose them all together by pressing Ctrl Shift and C. And again, we're going to select the same settings as earlier, the bottom one, and enable this check mark. Then press OK. And as you can see, all these singular clips have now been put into one composition, which now makes it earlier to duplicate it and just put it at the end again. And like I showed you before, to duplicate, we're just going to select the layer, then press Ctrl and D on our keyboard. And now when we zoom in a little bit, it will be easier to align it to the end of our clip. So now just drag the top one ahead to the first editing part ends, and then make sure you zoom in and align it exactly frame on frame. And like this, you duplicated your editing part. Now the next thing, which is going to be very important, is adding a good color correction. And to add a good color correction, we're going to go ahead to the top, select layer, new, and click on adjustment layer. Now we have to make sure that we don't drag the color correction above our text layers, because otherwise the text is going to look way too bright, since the color correction is going to change the lighting of our clips a bit. So select the adjustment layer and drag it down just above your editing footage. And color correction is a topic in itself, so I'm just going to show you the standard effects. First of all, search for sharpen, which like the name already says, will make your footage a bit sharper. Then drag it onto the adjustment layer and put the amount from 0 to 50. Next, search for BCC unsharpen mask, drag it onto the adjustment layer, put the radius from 1 to 15 and the amount from 50 to 25. And if you want to preview the color correction, make sure that you always put your resolution from quarter to full. Now lastly, we're going to add the looks effect. And if you click on the edit button, it will open up a whole nother window where you can also add effects. My favorite effects in here are gradient, haze, and LUT. But if you want to save yourself from adjusting all these clips perfectly to fit your footage, you can click the first link in the description to get 70% off of my color correction, which I use to turn my edits from looking like this into looking like this. So click the first link and get 70% off now. Limited time offer. After we edit our color correction, which is the most important part, we also want to add an outro with our name so that goofy ass CapCut editors can't steal our edit. And to do that, we're going to go to where our edit ends, which is right here, as you can see. And then we're going to create another text by selecting the text tool and clicking onto our screen. Now we're going to type our name and then again change the settings in the character panel till it fits our expectations. Then we're going to center it to the screen by using the align panel, and we have to cut it in half again by pressing Ctrl Shift and D to delete the excess part, because we obviously don't want it covering our whole edit. Then select the layer and press S to bring up the scaling, because we obviously also want to bring some movement into here. Set the keyframe at the beginning of the text layer and put the value from 100 down to 0. Now go ahead to where you want your animation to be fully finished and then put the value from 0 back up to 100. That way we're going to make it zoom in. And as you might have already guessed, we're going to have to change the graphs again. So select all the keyframes, right click, go to keyframe assistant and hit easy ease. settings, then open the graph editor, and I'll copy my graph. We're going to start by putting it up and then dragging this one ahead to the left a bit. Now when we close the graph editor and look at the animation, you will see that it looks a lot better. Now I also suggest to add the same text effects we added into our intro. So we're going to go ahead, select one of our text layers, and then select all the effects on here by pressing Ctrl and then selecting all of them. Then press Ctrl and C on your keyboard to copy them. Select the outro text layer, which we just created, and then press Ctrl and V to paste them. After we added our outro, and most importantly our high quality color correction, preview your edit one last time and make sure everything is perfect. And then lastly, we have to export our edit out of After Effects, which a lot of people struggle with. But don't worry, I will show you the best possible render settings so you can have 4K quality. Start by heading to the top and click on Composition, and then select Add to Render Queue. Now your timeline is going to turn into your render queue, and the first thing we have to do is click onto Output Module right here. Now if you use After Effects 2023 or above, you can use the format H.264. But if you have an older After Effects version, you don't have this option. In that case, just select QuickTime. Press on OK, and then lastly set your output, meaning where you want your edit to be saved. Finally, click on Render. Now rendering your edit can take a lot of time depending on how fast your PC is and how long your edit is. But once it's done, congratulations, you just made the best After Effects edit ever. Subscribe for more, and YouTube thinks this video would help you next. Thank you for watching and see you next time.